everybody, it's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We've reached another Friday, so of course I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. Um, September is actually National Sewing Month, which I didn't realize was a celebratory month. It started in 1982, which I think is really cool considering it's been almost 40 years. And it's just a month that recognizes the art of home sewing as a creative form of self expression. Uh, this is one of those hobbies, crafts, callings that can end up being so much more. Every massive designer that you love was once someone who sewed something at home and wasn't a professional. So, it morphs, it grows, it changes, it develops. And I think that sewing as a hobbyist can become something much, much bigger than, we initially might intend for it to be. I remember picking through patterns as a kid and just sort of having an unbelievably hard time just sewing in a straight line, let alone looking at these people who make these unbelievable pieces of art that go down runways in Paris and Milan and all of these massive cities. All of them started the way that most of us start as well. So, yes, Sewing Month is just a celebration of that self reliance and expression that can grow and develop and change over time. To help celebrate this month, I've decided to put together a little list of films and television shows that have everything to do with sewing, design, the fashion world, and how expansive of a thing sewing can be. So, even if you don't find a title within these picks that I've got for you today, definitely check out our video services. Those are CleveNet's Overdrive, Hoopla, and Canopy. You will certainly find something on there. There are thousands and thousands of videos available, and that's all entirely for free with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card. So without any further ado, I am going to jump right into the Rex. My first recommendation is for a TV series on our Hoopla Digital that I absolutely fell in love with. I hadn't watched it before I started prepping for this week, and I totally mainlined all 4 seasons, all of which are available on Hoopla Digital. And that is for the television series Velvet. Velvet is this incredibly engrossing Spanish TV show. It takes place in 1950s Madrid in this sort of super fancy department store setting called Velvet. And they, at the very beginning of the series, are trying to figure out the new collection that they're going to present to their customers. Now, this is a very high-end, luxurious store. You're going to be competing with, say, like all of the major Savile Row kind of stores in London. You're going to be competing with the massive, massive stores in New York. That's the kind of clientele you're hoping for. Anyway, the story is just, okay, so the production itself is absolutely gorgeous. The costuming is so on point. You see like those perfect lines, the crisp lines of like more of your uniform style costumes with the white crisp shirts under the black suiting. You've got like the steady seam on the back of like stockings. Like you, all of the details are so there, and just like the style of fashion in general is so glamorous and so incredible. It's like looking at old film footage of the Hollywood stars and everything going on. And then you have like this juxtaposition of sort of the administration of Velvet with all of their power suiting and things like that. And then you have, say, like the seamstresses who are doing the actual sewing of all of these different designs, very simply dressed, but so impeccably outfitted. It's just visually amazing. The storyline itself focuses on this sort of shift that Velvet is going through in order to sort of make a name for itself. But at the very center of the story, you have this really lovely, lovely romance going on between Anna and Alberto. Anna is just a seamstress in the basements of Velvet. She's putting things together, designing, and um, you've got Alberto, who is the son and heir apparent of Velvet's owner. He was sent off to London in order to sort of expand his horizons, and now he's being brought back into the fold, but is his thinking just a little too forward, a little too out there for the Madrid crowd, is sort of this constant question that's going on amidst that administrative sphere. And the two of them just have the most incredible chemistry. I mean, seriously, the first glance is just insane. And from there it just goes. It's just such a fun, engrossing, incredibly dramatic, wonderful series. I absolutely loved it. I watched it in just a couple of days, which I shouldn't admit because that means I spent entirely too much time in front of my television. Um, but it's one that catches you. Like the stories of all of the little side characters also are really engrossing. It's just a great drama TV show. This is perfect for people who love really detailed period pieces, um, but who also like sort of the kind of romancy elements of a nighttime soap. But really well written. I don't, not that I'm knocking like nighttime soaps like 90210 or Melrose or anything, but like I really enjoyed the storyline. It was very, very well done and very well performed. I thought all of the acting was so incredibly solid. Now, it is a Spanish television show, so of course you are going to have to deal with English language subtitles, but as I say every single time I recommend something in a foreign language, it is totally worth it. Um, you stop even noticing that the subtitles are a thing. It just starts to flow, and you will have a great time. If you like drama, if you like fashion, if you like romance, make sure you check out Velvet. It's available on Hoopla all 4 seasons, and you will not regret it. Okay, my next recommendation is for a fantastic documentary, also available on Hoopla Digital, called Dior and I. Now, this documentary is one that's been on my to be watched list for ages and ages. I just never managed to get around to it. One, I've never been the biggest Christian Dior fan. I've always been sort of, if, of all of the fashion houses, I've always felt like it was kind of, I don't know, snooty maybe? I don't know. That's just my perception. Of course, it has nothing to do with anything based on fact. It just has always felt that way. Even just looking at the styles that had always come out during like Oscar season or Golden Globe season, it was just not my thing. Anyway, I absolutely loved this documentary and this sense of combination of absolute creativity and total pragmatism that it brought together. Like, this is just a fantastic documentary for people who are very artistic, but who also just love to see the inner workings of a thing. Like, how does something go from A to B to C? Like, it's really, really interesting in that regard. So Dior and I obviously has to do with House of Dior, but it really focuses in on the creative director, Raf Simons, who at the time when he was appointed was, I guess, kind of a controversial person to put in that position. He was very much known as a minimalist, which at the time Dior was absolutely not considered to be. And it's sort of this shift in tone and how he takes the mantle of creative director and makes it his own. He turns Dior's designs without eradicating all of the history, but also managing to steer it in a new direction. And I loved the whole behind the scenes element of that, because his vision was so different from what they had been producing. It's fascinating. You get to see sort of the small drama that's involved behind the scenes. Like, anytime there's a change, no matter what industry you're in, you're going to get some clash. And watching that happen on screen was absolutely fascinating because you have creative personalities. And a lot of times, like, you're so tied in to your art that criticism or a call to change the style that you've been working on feels like a criticism to who you are. So you get like personalities that are immediately feeling like defensive, and they don't censor that. It's absolutely there. But along with that, you get this really remarkable mix of pragmatism where some of these women who have been seamstresses and pattern cutters with the company have been there for 40 plus years. So they know, regardless of how they feel about something, it's soldier on, just keep moving. And seeing those layers work together, seeing that creative sensibility pushed up against their pragmatism is absolutely fascinating. I absolutely loved that. And the story is theirs as much as it is Raf's. So you get this person who comes in and who has a new vision. He's got 8 weeks to put up a new collection, um, which is no time whatsoever. And he really is making some massive stylistic changes. And then you add on to that working with somebody new, working with new teams, and still wanting it to be a collaborative effort. You never get the sense that Raf is a tyrant or a despot. A lot of times with these sort of fashion house documentaries, you definitely get the sense that maybe hiding behind the veneer for the cameras is actually kind of a total monster, a Godzilla who's ready to crush the peons below his feet. But you never get that sense. He's either a fantastic actor or he's really very collaborative in his art. He gets feedback. He looks for ways to combine ideas and how to make what he wants to happen even better. Um, you get that sense of urgency because, again, you're working on a very truncated timetable, and they're trying to show a truncated timetable in the span of a movie. So you always feel a bit like rushed while you're watching, which is a really cool sensation to have during a fashion documentary of all things. Um, you get the sense of urgency from all of the people who are trying to get from point A to point B, your seamstresses, your pattern cutters, your logistics people, your management. Everybody is always on the go. And still, there's this underlying current of uncertainty because, again, you have this sort of old guard who still is questioning the whole reasoning behind this new guy's appointment. Why this particular guy when this is not the style that we've done? This is not what Dior is known for. And it's just a really great documentary. I feel like it's very honest. It stays true to a creative sensibility, but also like a pragmatic one as far as logistics go. It's just a really well put together behind the scenes of what a fashion house is supposed to be at the very least. So if you're interested in seeing how a fashion house runs day to day, or more specifically runs day to day right up until a major collection showing, make sure you check out Dior and I. I thought it was really eye-opening, and in addition to being eye-opening, just really enlightening about Simmons in and of himself, like just as an artist. I thought was really interesting because I wasn't familiar with his work, and I'm just not, I'd not been a fan prior to. So yeah, make sure you check out Dior and I, available on Hoopla Digital. Excellent pick. Okay, so my next recommendation, also available on Hoopla Digital, is for the incredible adaptation of Rosalie Harris's best-selling novel, The Dressmaker. Now, The Dressmaker is definitely a star vehicle. It is all about Kate Winslet, and that's just how it should be. I have never seen Kate Winslet in a movie that I haven't thought she was amazing in. I might not have liked the movie itself, but I've always thought, wow, she's an incredible performer. The Dressmaker, thankfully, is an excellent movie. It's got drama, it's got romance, it's got tragedy, it's got heck of a lot of humor in it. It's one of those films that really runs the gamut of emotions, and I just really enjoyed it so much. Dressmaker tells the story of this very beautiful, very talented dressmaker named Tilly Dunnage. Tilly, of course, is played by Kate Winslet. She has worked in these exclusive Paris fashion houses as a designer. She's created incredibly beautiful things, and she ends up coming back to her backwoods Australian hometown after years and years of never seeing anyone from there. And as the movie unfolds, this mystery happens, or mystery becomes revealed. So apparently, when she was a child, circumstances happened where Tilly ends up being accused of murdering a young boy. We have no idea what happened. We have no clue as to if it's true or not. We're mired in all of these rumors, and it's a small town, so of course everybody's in everybody else's business. There's so much gossip, but you never know if any of it is true. And so, amidst beautiful costumes, a story that's got humor, tragedy, and all of this, you've got this really intense mystery going on too, because that alone would make its own story. Anyway, she returns home to take care of her ailing mother, and of course, all kinds of ridiculousness happens. You have these renewed relationships, some of them platonic, some of them romantic, and each one of those relationships sort of takes a chunk of time from the storyline. You see her trying to make a place for herself amidst all of these rumors that come up again. Everyone is nice, or at least vaguely nice to her in front of her face, but like when she turns her back, they're still talking about what happened or what may have happened, years and years and years ago. Um, Her love interest is played by Liam Hemsworth, who has always done a really solid job playing that kind of role. And this is no different. He brings out certain characteristics in Tilly that definitely aid the furthering of the storyline. So props to him for that. And you have this really fascinating relationship between Tilly and the local law enforcement. Uh, they have history of not of a romantic nature, but I don't want to give away. That's a definite spoiler if I went into that. But they have a history, and they sort of develop a friendship that's really incredibly beautiful. I actually was. It's probably one of my favorite parts of the entire story. Now, amidst all of this like interpersonal drama, you have ridiculous fashion and a fantastic storyline that goes with that, where essentially Tilly is giving sort of these glam makeovers to the townswomen who frumpy doesn't even really begin to describe this group. So she's giving them all these glam makeovers, and it's visually just really fun to see, like all of these drab, dark, bland, blendy colors all of a sudden get flipped, turned upside down. And period piece clothing is always so interesting to me. Like, the structure is so different from today's lines that I don't know, it's just very transformative, and that's absolutely what happens there too. So you have all of these elements mixing together. You've got the relationship dramas, you've got this past mystery that ends up becoming a thing again, you have current issues that stem from all of this stuff mixing together, and it all just blends in a way to make this really beautiful, dramatic film that I think if you like period pieces at all, you'll definitely get into this. You can 100% tell this is a film adapted from a book. It feels that way. Not in a bad way, but it definitely feels like a book adaptation. And it definitely feels like a book club book too. I don't know if that isn't a good description for everybody, but for me, as someone who's been part of lots of book clubs and who has friends who are really into book clubs, that's the perfect description. So if you like very female-centric stories, and it absolutely is, if you like um, fashion, if you like fashion history, if you like mystery, and seriously, there's a doozy in this one, make sure you check out The Dressmaker. The acting all the way around, whether it be from Kate Winslet, whether it be from Judy Davis, who plays her mother, Hugo Weaving, who plays the local law enforcement, Liam Hemsworth, who plays her love interest. I could go on. Barry Otto's in there. I mean, it's a veritable who's who of Australian actors and actresses. Besides Kate Winslet, who is of course English, but does a very reasonable approximation of an Australian accent because it's Kate Winslet. If you like any of those elements, those actors, that kind of storyline, you absolutely have to check out The Dressmaker. It's a very solid film and a really good pick. I think this might be my pick of the week. So yes, The Dressmaker, available on Hoopla Digital. You won't regret it. Moving on to my Canopy recommendations. These are two documentaries that are absolutely fantastic. The first of which is McQueen, The Life and Career of Fashion Designer Alexander McQueen. I have been fascinated by Alexander McQueen for years now. As as a figure in the design world, I just found him absolutely fascinating. He's so controversial and he makes such incredibly interesting artistic things. But I had never watched this documentary and it is amazing. It is respectful. Um, it's not at all sort of like an expose in any kind of way, but it does sort of delve into his life and to who he was, his vision, what he wanted to become, what he had hoped he would become in the future. And that in and of itself makes it like kind of tragic at the same time. So, Alexander McQueen was, of course, this extraordinary fashion designer um, who came up through the ranks. He had very little education, but ended up being trained at this like very, very elite um, design school based on his portfolio work. Again, he did not have even like your base education. He didn't get A levels or anything like that, which are the more academically rigorous classes that you take when you're still in school. I think it said somewhere in the documentary that he had just like one O level or something like that, which is more of a like trades level um, status kind of situation in the UK. And, he managed to, based purely on his talent and his skill, become the McQueen, like this one of the biggest, most well-known designers of his time. And it really does a respectful job of talking about him in a very real way. It doesn't, make him into like this perfect figure. They definitely touch on difficulties he had both in his work and then in his personal life and everything. All of it, of course, leading up to his death. And it's just a really, in some parts, moving documentary, I think. Um, you get to see these very exclusive interviews with close friends, family, fellow designers, people who were very much a part of his daily life. And at no point do you sense that they're glossing over things, that they're making it a prettier picture than it actually was. It feels very, very real, which seems like, oh yeah, of course it is. It's a documentary. But I feel like these biographical documentaries a lot of times very much have a veneer of shiny, happy beautifulness to them. And this does not. It definitely touches on the aspects of his life that were more controversial, and about of his artistic life that were more controversial. I mean, he definitely was criticized for being a misogynist from some of his designs, which to the very end he insisted was not the case. Um, he had very specific artistic goals. He was always very much a theatrical designer. He wanted his runways to be, an experience. That you had to be there to really understand what he was doing, that kind of a vibe. And through watching this, I definitely feel like you get that sense about him that everything had to be perfectly performed, and it had to be um over the top, but not in a negative sense, like just definitely a very elevated kind of performative way. Now, this documentary won a ton of awards. It was nominated for Outstanding British Film of the Year and Best Documentary at the BAFTAs. It was also shown at the Tribeca Film Festival and won awards there. Um, so, there's definitely a sense of pedigree to this, that there's, what's the word? That there's a known truth to this particular documentary. So if you're interested in seeing sort of the real behind the scenes of Alexander McQueen's life, I would definitely recommend this. I thought it was amazing. I really loved sort of getting a deeper sense of the way his artistic life went. And it was just a really, really interesting documentary. So, again, available on Canopy. McQueen, The Life and Career of Fashion Designer Alexander McQueen. It is a must watch. All right, my final recommendation this week is also from Canopy, and as I mentioned, it is also a documentary. This one is called Dries, The Creative Process of a Master Fashion Designer, and this one is all about the independent fashion designer Dries van Noten. I was not super familiar with Van Noten before watching this documentary. I'd heard of him, but I wasn't really familiar with his work. He was just sort of that name that I kind of knew associated with other names. And I'm so glad I watched this because I find him to be such a fascinating person at this point. Very much an artist's sensibility. He does not work with the big houses. He's not attached to, say, like Gucci or to Versace or Chanel or any of these massive houses that everybody knows that have these ginormous shows. He's a third generation, I want to say, independent designer. He is definitely someone who needs that independence. He loves being able to work his vision and not be tied to current trends. And he talks about that, how he absolutely isn't trendy. He's not even trying to create a trend itself. He just wants to make beautiful things that he is inspired by. And I know, of course, people always say that sort of thing where they're not attached to trends and they aren't trying to make something big and whatever. But this documentary definitely gives you the sense that he 100% is that guy. He really is just the artist whose art form just happens to be clothing as opposed to a canvas or a piece of sculpture, and I just find him to be absolutely fascinating. His shows are these massive sort of cult showings where anybody who's anybody goes to. You have to be there. If you aren't, you're not anyone special in the fashion world. And his stuff is always very much ahead of trend, if that makes sense. And yet you don't get the sense that he's also trying to shock, or it's definitely from an organic place. And watching his process was really interesting. Like, he really does base things off of his own personal garden, the way he's feeling, everything is based on these little tiny pieces of his daily life. And it was just really interesting to see that sort of point of view. Since I am not a fashion person, like I wear like 3 colors and a couple of different styles and that's about it. But to watch like someone whose entire life is so engrossed by different textiles and different colors and different shapes, and how all of this, is based off of seeing a new rose bloom in his garden that morning, that was just an incredible thing. And I just think that this documentary does such a good job of tying all those elements together in a really like moving kind of way. And it's beautiful. This documentary was absolutely beautiful and so good at just picking those teeny tiny moments and making them meaningful. So if you're interested in fashion as an art form and someone who really looks at it as an art form, if you're interested in art in general, definitely check out this documentary, Dries, The Creative Process of a Master Fashion Designer. It was an incredible, incredible documentary, and I would recommend it to anyone, really, regardless of your interest in fashion. Just if you're interested in documentaries, if you're interested in art, this is one to watch. Make sure you do it. You won't regret it. Okay, so those are all of my recommendations for this week's Film Rec Friday. I had such a good time putting this list together. Again, as someone who's not super fashiony, who generally is more of an art person rather than a fashion person, I loved these movies. They were really, really interesting. They kept me engrossed from beginning to end, and I would recommend them to anybody out there, seriously, whether you're a fashion person or not. Um, if you have any recommendations of your own for films that have to do with fashion or design or sewing or anything like that, please, please, please make a comment. Let us know. I'm always up for film recommendations. You know, I love watching movies. If you have any recommendations for future themes that you'd like to see me cover, please recommend those as well. As always, thank you so, so much for joining me this week. I hope you had fun. I hope you found a title that you would like to check out. Again, if not, make sure you check out the library's video services. You will 100% find something within the thousands and thousands of options available. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out this episode and say, I hope I see you next time. Bye-bye!